I think that is people's perspective. I'm not sure that I buy into that perspective. And if the IPO market is definitely open, CoreWeave has done really well. We're seeing a lot more of the traditional fintechs come back to the market who had previously shelved. Obviously, Circle is incredible. I expect a lot more people to try to IPO more broadly. This is not a crypto specific point. And to your point, there is the Fireblocks who's been wanting or thinking about an IPO for a long period of time. But relative to what if you went and talked to somebody at Goldman, what they would tell you is ideal profile for a public company, Fireblocks is not there, right? And that's true of Chainalysis, which is a great SaaS business. That's true of most of the other people we talked about. Kraken is a different story, and I expect we'll see them public, maybe not this year, but maybe next year but I'm sure that's a moving target. And I think some of the exchanges are maybe different stories and some of the brokerages because they scale with the market really quickly. But for the other guys, they might force themselves public. And I expect that we'll have a number of less than ideal people that we're not even talking about who will just say, I need liquidity. And
what do you mean force themselves public? Like SPAC or something like that? Or
they might SPAC or they might, be talking to their underwriter and the underwriter's like, listen, I don't know if there's, a lot of demand for your business, but we can get you public. We can do direct listing, or we'll just have we'll raise $100 or $200 million instead of the $1 billion that Circle raised in the IPO. And I expect we'll see a number of those. Because again, I'm not sure that this Circle story is transferable to the rest of crypto.
That's fair. And one of the things that ends up happening is for you to be public, one of the things that you want. And actually, this was very clear with Exodus. So Exodus is actually maybe a good example because it's a crypto company that has a wallet that went public. And I think the story there is, I think it sits at $800 million market cap. It was just over $1 billion, but it had $50 to $80 million run rate. So clearly under $500 million. And then it's interesting because the price sort of languished post IPO until they actually got covered by Analyst. And then after the Analysts, things started picking up a little bit. And so it's just, are you included in the category by the Analysts of crypto companies that you can get exposure to? I think it's a little bit of that story. And are you going to be covered by the Analysts? And are you interested enough? And it turns out if you have under $1 billion of market cap, and really $3, which is where the $300 million, 10x, just call it a 10x multiple. That's where the $300 million, $500 million comes from, right? $3 to $5 billion valuation. If you're much lower than that, analysts are not going to take their time to cover you. And if analysts are not covering you, then people aren't really, the large institutionals aren't really going to deploy capital, which means that there's very limited liquidity. And then the price may languish and things, you're just not getting the price that you deserve. So Exodus Wallet now maybe is a good example of what it actually looks like for you to have a subscale IPO, which, it wasn't a terribly amazing success, but it wasn't a failure either. And so I don't know, maybe that can be emulated. But I think the question is, if you want to go the traditional route, will the underwriters actually take you out? And maybe this multiple on Circle, and I agree with Rob, is not the same thing, but maybe it will kind of whet their appetite. I would say that there's 3 categories of companies that would be next. Number one, something that already has an equivalent in terms of trading to a public market and has scale. So Kraken, a great example. We already know how Coinbase works in terms of trading multiples. The second one would be things that actually have recurring revenue and, look a lot more like a SaaS product. So a Fireblocks, a Chainalysis, recurring revenue, attach rates, churn. You can sort of measure these things and it's not really dependent on the market. And then the third one are actually businesses that are highly dependent on the price of Bitcoin and on the price of cryptocurrencies, which you have variable revenue and you really don't want that amount of volatility and not to have been diversified before you go public, because otherwise you're just going to be strictly correlated to Bitcoin. Nobody's going to give you the value that you deserve. And they're just you're by volatility, right? You're just a Bitcoin tracker, publicly listed. And you don't really want that. You don't want to be CEO of a publicly traded company that only has direct exposure to the market volatility.
Yeah. Diogo, can you take us into the board meetings of Anchorage right now and divulge everything? No. And can you, and tells everything that happens in them. No, can you tell us in the room, because this must be a conversation. It's look, we're maybe a little small to IPO, but we've got a phenomenal business, great customer set. Do you start making acquisitions right now? Do you wait until the next cycle to IPO? Are cycles dead? Are you waiting until 27? Do you go raise a late stage? How do you make a decision like this?
So for Anchorage is very different. I think we all know that it has this long-term goal of being public. The only thing, what we sell at the end of the day is trust. That's why we're the first and still only federally chartered bank in the US that does crypto custody, et cetera. But the only thing that is more trusted than a federal bank is a publicly traded federal bank, right? And so the path to trust adds a lot of value to the business. And I think that is the path that we're on. And it's always been the path that we wanted to be on. And so that to us is slightly different than another company that may stay private for much, much longer, because we do have a goal, and that just benefits the business in general in terms of trust, which is what we sell. To a lot, and another reason why Anchorage is potentially a great candidate is also being a bank means that you already have all of your financials in order. You already have stuff that is audited. You already do reporting. You already do a lot of the heavy lifting that is necessary for you to go public. I was at Square when we were preparing to go public, and through, the IPO and how crazy that setup was. And, it's intense, but getting a bank charter is also very intense. And so maybe in that sense, we're also further ahead. But the questions still maintain, which are what John and the Collison brothers kind of like talk about publicly, which is why, what do we have to gain? And if you have an amazing balance sheet, you have more money than you need. You are growing. You are diversifying your business model. You are becoming more and more attractive each month that goes by, and you can do all the partnerships, and you're really like leading the pack on all the areas that you want to lead. What is this going to really get you? Like, what is having access to the public markets really going to get you? Like, do you want to issue debt? Do you want to have some strategy that the capital markets are required for that? And then at the end of the day, the answer is no, there's no specific strategy there. And yes, the trust would be amazing. But it's something that we're walking towards and making sure we're ready for. And think about optionality. We want to be in a situation where if we think it's the right thing at that moment, we're ready and we can immediately do it, but not something that is kind of like a big mandate that we must do it. It's how we think about it and how the conversations go.
Yeah.
And by the way, the other thing is that obviously as part of our board, there's venture investors like liquidity. And so there's always like, nobody's pushing us, but there's a little bit of great, Anchorage, it'd be great to see this publicly listed.
But like, isn't there also the benefit, like for your business, you talk about trust. There is more trust if you're a public company.
That is exactly right. And that is one of the biggest benefits for Anchorage, and one of the biggest reasons why that would be good for us. But that doesn't apply to the general crypto company on its own. I mean, it does, but specifically for our business, trust is really the thing that we sell.